Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is another episode as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short, hezzy tween and stutter step away here in the UK. We're going to get stuck into the trade deadline today. We're going to do a tier list because we had so much fun doing that last time when we ranked every NBA team's year of 2025. So we're going to rank their trade deadline business as well. Lots to get into in that. We're going to do some understated stories from the trade deadline or just over the past week in general. We've kind of gone either way with this one, and then some bold predictions for the All-Star game at the weekend, because that is going to be an exciting spectacle on very early Western time. Maybe catch a little bit of it here, UK time, catch a bit of Damian Lillard maybe in the three-point contest on that torn Achilles. We'll get stuck into all of that, but before we take a deeper dive, first I have to ask Mr. Lasker, how you doing?
All good over here, my man. It's the All-Star break is upon us, and what's great about the NBA is that there's still a lot of questions to be answered. I think I think it's safe to say that I don't think we know who's going to win it all at this point. It's pretty much still in the air, which is great because it gives us a great second half of the season to come back to. So I'm ready to kind of, get my rest, get rejuvenated, and get ready for this second half, man. How about you?
Yeah, I think it promises to be a really exciting second half. I'm kind of like glad for the reset. It's definitely been like an intensive first half of the season for good reasons, really. Like, there's been loads to talk about, loads off the court, but loads on it really as well. Like, I think it's been a brilliant regular season so far. That's given us loads of talking points. The rookie class that's come in has been really good. The rookie class that's coming in next year is really good as well. So you're seeing a lot of teams now scrapping or tanking or whatever you would like to call it, Drew, to make sure they get a high pick in that draft. My Clippers may well have a high pick, so I have to be pleased about that as long as it all comes through. And we'll see when we come to draft lottery night whether it'll all be all right on the night. But we'll move on to our tier list just to start this then, Drew, because quite a lot of teams ended up doing business at the trade deadline. I'll get ready to share my screen with the tier list on here. And there was just some really interesting things to come from it. I've sort of sent you over a bit of a fact file, really, of what each team did. I mean, loads of them are just the headline trades, really, but that was from NBA.com where I got that list and managed to sort of break it down team by team, because nowhere you look on the internet manages to do it team by team. They all just kind of do it in like the list of trades came through. So I've been sweating over this little fact file for me and Drew in order to make sure this tier list is as good as possible for you listeners and viewers out there. So we'll start off, Drew, with the Atlanta Hawks, who did a lot in the end. Ended up being a selling team from the moment Trae Young left, which was potentially kind of surprising, potentially not, just because of Jalen Johnson's breakthrough year. So they bring in the end Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, Gabe Vincent, Jock Landale, Duop Reith, who gets waived, CJ McCollum, Corey Kispert, and a couple of picks to boot there, and lose Trae Young, Vic Krejci, and Kristaps Porzingis. I don't know about you, Drew. Like, I'm tempted to straight away go in quite high for the Hawks. Loads of it is sort of hinged on the fact that Jalen Johnson has had a good season, but I think sometimes NBA teams can be a little bit stubborn, especially when it comes to young guys, and not jump onto that selling train early enough to make sure the young guy's got people who fit his timeline around him. I think the Hawks have done brilliantly here and got off a guy in Trae Young who was great but came with his problems, and Porzingis I feel really sorry for, because it seems like this illness for him is going to rule him out for really some time, if not make him never be able to touch an NBA court in the same way again.
Yeah, I mean, they probably made a lot more transactions than we would have probably anticipated before the trade deadline. I think the only thing we all had our eye on was Trae Young. But it looks like with Kuminga, which that trade came as a huge surprise, he fits their kind of timeline. He fits their mold when you talk about the length and youth that they have with Jalen Johnson and the rest of those guys. I just kind of question his fit exactly, because you think they're trying to build a defensive mindset team. I'm not sure if Kuminga is that, but maybe he's that scorer that they need, because Jalen Johnson is a more do-it-all, fill up the stat sheet, but they don't have that guy that you can give the ball to at the end of the game. You obviously have McCollum, but he's not going to be there long term, you would like to assume. So, maybe he's their get out of jail card offensively for the future. I like what they've done overall. I'm B plus B kind of area. I'm not sure where you kind of lie around there.
I like B. I'm happy to go straight in with that.
Yeah.
Really, it doesn't feel like it's quite A because I think like A is probably when a buying team buys like the guy that's going to get them over the line. And I'm not sure
Yeah.
if many people have done that this deadline, but we can maybe come on to talk about
Yeah.
some teams we think are creeping up into that A. But yeah, I think B suits the Atlanta Hawks. So
Yep.
we can kind of move on then to the Boston Celtics. Speaking of buy-in teams, really, they only bring in Nikola Vucevic and a couple of second rounders from a couple of teams and a bit of cash from the Nets as well. I never know how to like quantify cash really because it's never like told how much cash and like is it like $5? So like there you go.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing service, like you tip your delivery driver. But Anthony Simons, Xavier Tillman, and Josh Minott all on the way out for the Celtics. And like Drew, when I say about buying teams who buy just what they need, I think they get a more playoff-ready center in Nikola Vucevic than Luka Garza is. I think Neemias Queta has shown so much this season that he can, for me, be a playoff center. If only on the defensive end, really. There's going to be an offensive imbalance with him in terms of, he can bring more on the defensive end, but you make up for that a little bit in Vooch. Means that if you can't play Cater any game because the offense isn't there, then you can bring in Vooch, who can definitely score. They get rid of a guy in Anthony Simons who's contributed a lot this season but was one of their assets, and they managed to bring in Vooch for him, so I've got no sort of gripes with that really. And then Tillman and Minot have played not big parts for Boston this season, so again this is another one where I could probably put Boston into like B, like at worst high C, but I do quite like the Vooch fit for them really.
Yeah, I see it as a B specifically because I look at it this way, Josh. You've weakened your backcourt because Anthony Simons has been great for them this regular season.
Yeah.
So, but you strengthen your front court. And then the other fold of it is maybe you sacrifice a little bit during the regular season because I think Anthony Simons, he helps you more during the 82 course game of the season. But Vooch, as you alluded to, he is definitely there for the playoffs. He's going to help them more for the playoffs. When the game slows down, specifically, he's there to rebound, gobble up rebounds, which he's great at. And so I see it as almost kind of a fair exchange. So I wouldn't see it as A tier, but I see it as B tier, that you didn't get worse, but you got better for hopefully, because that's still a question we need answered when the playoffs do come, but he's there to help the playoffs. So I'm more in the B area as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like Jason Tatum is going to be, with the main Celtics now, so he's clearly on his way back to some kind of readiness. And that's the thing, like Anthony Simons brings you shot creation in the backcourt, and I know Jason Tatum is not necessarily a backcourt player, but brings you that level of shot creation. So you can imagine a world in which Jason Tatum just steps kind of back into his role, if not kind of second fiddle to Jaylen Brown. But I've said on this show with you before, Drew, that last time the Celtics won the championship, Jason Tatum was second fiddle in terms of offensive touches to Jaylen Brown. So that's going to be no stranger to him in terms of that role. And then you get off another shot creator. You bring in Vooch, who can't create his own shot necessarily, but is definitely a guy that can put up big numbers, and you sacrifice a little bit on the defensive end. But Anthony Simons wasn't exactly a plus defender anyway.
Yeah, just quickly, would you personally bring back Tatum towards the tail end of the season?
It's so hard to say because the sort of balanced, nuanced part of you wants to say like whatever the sports science and the medical guys say. Really, I think I would be tempted just because the East is so wide open. And I understand what people say about like, the playoffs are a much more like intense environment and all those things, but it's also like slower half court offense. So it's not going to be like you're going to have Jason Tatum like busting a gut to get up and down the court. I think there's a way you can kind of like manage how the Celtics play. Like Tatum can be the guy who is crashing the offensive glass so that it's like the other guys who are having to run back and do that side of it. Like I just think there's ways you can kind of negate for what you may lose in terms of Tatum's sharpness. What do you think?
I think if you are bringing him back to get a head start on next season, yes. But if it's to win a championship, no. Because for this year specifically, I feel like it's a lose-lose situation. Because right now, the Celtics are, for the most part, overachievers. They're rolling. They got a good thing going. I'm not sure I would want to disrupt that chemistry that they built so far this season and the pecking orders and all of that. And maybe the counter argument could be, well, you got rid of Simons. You need to kind of bolster that scoring that you lose with him. So I see it as a lose situation in that regard, and I also see it in a lose situation if you play devil's advocate and you say, well, what if the Celtics stumble into the playoffs and they need to be injected with some juice? I feel like that's a lose-lose situation for Tatum because maybe he comes in pressing because he feels the pressure of being needed. So under both of those circumstances, I feel like it's a lose-lose situation for him. I wouldn't bring him back unless you say, hey, let's get him back to you, some game flow, so next year he has the confidence that his foot is 100% healed because you never quite know until you start playing games.
Yeah, that's all fair. I think it really is like a balance thing, and it's going to be one of those things that as he gets close to coming back, I can imagine Stephen A. and ESPN and all those kind of talking heads having big arguments over this. But like I could just completely go either way on it. Like I can be persuaded, like you say, to not focus too much on the short term, but then there's part of me that just looks at like the weaknesses that OKC have, the health issues that Denver have had over so much of this season. Again, really that may stop them getting to the sort of holy grail. And then Detroit, like, do Detroit have what it takes in the playoffs? Like I keep looking at these like fights that Detroit get in and imagine them in that intense playoff environment and say, like, is that good that they have that like fighting spirit, or is it the sort of thing that's going to spill over? Like, can you trust Isaiah Stewart to stay on a court if he's got someone winding him up a little bit in that playoff environment? So I just think it might all be there for Boston short term, and ultimately Tatum and Brown aren't getting any younger either. I know they're not old guys necessarily, but getting into the peaks of their career now. So do you want to just almost could you pick up like a cheaper championship this season and then make the head start on next season as well, is where I'm kind of a little bit torn on it still. But we'll move on anyway, Drew. We'll stick to these teams and their trade deadlines and the Brooklyn Nets, because the Brooklyn Nets were one of the teams who were coming into the deadline probably selling, but I'll be honest, like I didn't expect them to sell too big, because I kind of like where they're at in terms of rebuilding. Like it goes both ways really. Like sometimes with a team that's winning a lot, like you've seen it with the Spurs and the Pistons really, like do you want to buy too much, make a big swing and then potentially miss that? And if you're selling, like do you want to sell a guy in Michael Porter Jr. who is like a young enough asset really to be a part of the next generation of the Brooklyn Nets, sell high on him as an asset to bring in more? Or is that like overselling then, and do you push your timeline too far down the process of a rebuild? So the Brooklyn Nets didn't do very much. They bring in OG Akbaji, who I can imagine contributing to the rotation, but besides that there's not a whole lot that leaps off the page. Hunter Tyson got waived in the end. Josh Minott is still just about there, but I can't imagine playing big minutes. So I think they probably are the first C team of this. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, the needle is not moved at all. So you got a team that's losing, that's looking to the draft. So, I look at that as a C or a D team, just because they're just keeping the path, right? Sometimes the best move is no move at all or nothing major. So, it was a big questions around Michael Porter Jr., what would happen with him exactly. So I'm still curious to what they have planned for him. Maybe it's to have him as the franchise guy surrounded with youth. Or maybe it's to buy them time while the young guys get better, because you want to at least be competitive, and Michael Porter Jr. keeps them competitive. Whereas if you go all out young, you can have a lot of embarrassing nights. So yeah, somewhere late D, high D plus, C minus area, I'm there.
Yeah, and similarly, the Charlotte Hornets is the next team on this list. Another team who I think have probably like made themselves sneaky buyers, really, but definitely not one that should have been taking a big swing by any means. There was kind of like vague talk at the start of the season about whether they trade LaMelo Ball because they like what they've got with Canepa. I never really bought into any of that talk, and the Charlotte Hornets have become like an incredible team in the past few weeks and months as well. An incredible team to watch, but a winning team too. I quite like what they've done. There's been a lot of roster movement over the last few days, but I quite like the Kobe White for Colin Sexton swap. I love Colin Sexton, obviously namesake for me. I was speaking to Elliot from Hoopin' and Luton actually, because I'm going to try and get a Sexton jersey in the back of my setup here because I've got a Sexton 4 one for Liverpool, so a Sexton 2, and he's got like a nice Cavs one that I like the look of, so a little Sexton 2-4, which matches my social handles in the background. But he gets to go to Chicago there. Kobe White gets to come in, and Kobe White's already spoken out about how he thought he'd be next on the chopping block in Chicago. Maybe this will be home for him and he'll sign a deal here, and it means that Charlotte gets another really solid combo guard in Kobe White. I just like the moves that the Hornets have made around the fringes here, and they're probably going as another C team for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with with you. I'm right there in the category of C. For Charlotte, maybe this trade deadline looks a lot differently a month ago, right? It's the winning streak that all of a sudden you all in on this core where there were some questions earlier in the season, and rightfully so. LaMelo Ball was never healthy. This is our first opportunity to see what they look like when they're healthy. So maybe they're one more piece away. You upgrade your bench with Kobe White over Sexton, along with getting younger. However, if I'm Kobe White, I'm rating this as an E because I'm not happy because you're automatically coming in as a bench player, right? Whereas you got to think he's looking at himself as a starter. I'm not sure if this is a contract year, but I know that contract is running out, that 3-year deal he signed with Chicago fairly soon. You're trying to put yourself in a situation to re-up. So I'm not sure this works out well for Kobe White personally, but for Charlotte, absolutely. You got a dynamic player along with being younger coming off the bench. Definitely C on all eyes.
Yeah, and I guess if you're Kobe White, it's a nice flip from the situation of like Chicago where you were an important, player in terms of the rotation, but Chicago were just never going anywhere, and that's been the case for so many years now. And you get to go to an up and comer in Charlotte, where even if you are a bench player, you're sixth man, you're right in there as sixth man, and you get to look at it as Charlotte definitely have a playoff future. You'd say even with this core, if he can remain a part of that core. Like I think the sixth man has kind of died a little bit, and I'm a bit sad about that. And Kobe White, I don't know, feels like it could be a bit throwback sixth man vibes for me, Drew.
Yeah, he has the game that kind of fits that mold. But
Just like energy and offense, and yeah.
Yeah, but like in this business, it's all about getting the bag, securing the bag while you can. So. But also another side of it from his perspective is, hey, prove that you can produce in a smaller role on a winning team. That's valuable, right? Like that has a lot of value around teams that's trying to build for the future that you could do something else. I mean, because I wouldn't say that it's easy, but it is easier to score on a bad team, which we've seen him do over the last couple of years. So let's see if you can play a different role. Let's see if you can impact winning, and maybe you increase your bag that way. We shall see.
We shall see. Kobe White will be watching. If you're somehow listening to this podcast, if you are, then hi. Feel free to come on as a guest at some point if you like, and tell us all about these moves. But we'll move on to his old team, the Chicago Bulls, who have just a very strange deadline, and I despair a little bit for Bulls fans, really, for a franchise that, for anyone who watched The Last Dance out there, people who fell in love with basketball. I know some people who fell in love with basketball through watching Last Dance, and like this whole idea of like the Chicago Bulls being this like brilliant franchise has just been completely dismantled over the last few years, really, and I despair with that front office a little bit, that it took them this long to become a selling team. Even now at the point that they're a selling team, they've sold too low on a couple of these assets. Like I think Ayo Dosunmu in particular should have been able to get you at least a first round pick. I think Kobe White could have maybe got you a first round pick if you'd have sold at a better time than now on him. And then just bringing in so many guards, like they've not left themselves with like a functioning basketball team now, really. And like I know when you're a seller, you don't necessarily have to. And listen, it's easier to tank when your roster makes absolutely no sense, I guess. But because it makes absolutely no sense, Drew, I kind of don't want to put them very high in this tier list. I'm looking down at sort of E and F tier at least.
Definitely. Right now, out of every team we ranked so far, I rank them 2 tiers below them because I'm confused on what the future plan is. They kind of remind me of Sacramento, that is you like scratching your head and saying, huh? What? Like, what are you trying to do? You're really, really guard heavy. And they just been in no man's land the last couple of years. Not good, but not too bad where they can land a blockbuster lottery pick. So, when you think about all of these guys they shipped off, Kobe White, Ayo, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, they haven't gotten one first-round pick off these guys. That's incredible. So for me, it's the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, absolutely. The bottom of the barrel. I've put them in E for now. I'll be a little bit kind to them, but there's definitely room for them to move, to put more people in. I can't imagine many teams being sort of around F, but if there was, if we could maybe just delete the F tier and have the Chicago Bulls at the bottom, because I've got a bit of a feeling, spoiler alert, that they're going to be right down there come the end of this. But we'll move on to their Eastern Conference counterparts, the Cleveland Cavaliers, much higher up the Eastern Conference, it must be said, with their moves for James Harden, Keon Ellis, and Dennis Schroeder. Emmanuel Miller in there as well. I'm not sure if he's been waived actually. I think he might still be sort of hanging around on the roster, and losing Darius Garland and DeAndre Hunter and a future second round pick to the Clippers in that Darius Garland trade. I really like the Cavs bringing in James Harden. Drew, I spoke about it on the last episode. I think it suits their kind of timeline of winning. I think Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell as a backcourt wasn't working. Suddenly you've got a more sort of functioning offense, really. I think now with James Harden, I think you've even seen it a little bit in the first few games, really, what James Harden can bring. He's effectively like 25 points a night before you even think about anything else. He's right up there in assists as well. This just feels like it fits for Cleveland for sure.
Yeah, this team is an A+ for me. I love everything that they've done because I've actually covered this team a couple of times this year. And all of the issues that I've noticed, they've got rid. DeAndre Hunter was supposed to come over and be a starter. He actually ended up on the bench, and you could tell he wasn't happy. They got rid of him. Darius Garland, very small player, has been injured since last year with that toe injury. A lot of question marks there. They get rid of him. Lonzo Ball had fallen out of the rotations a couple of times this year, was one of the worst three-point shooters in the league at one point. He isn't getting enough paint touches for that team. That's why the bigs were suffering. And then you look at Schroeder, who is a timely player. Like, he's unorthodox, he's eccentric, but you cannot argue that he's right on time, right when you need him. A bench guy who can bring you energy. We've seen the things he's done in Eurobasket. Keon Ellis, you got to think with him, it's only room to grow, right? We haven't seen the best of him. And then James Harden moves the needle because he's going to take so much pressure off of Mitchell, because Mitchell had to balance being that dynamic scorer and then trying to force feed those bigs, which isn't his, strength, right? Whereas James Harden, he loves a lob threat. He has two guys. He can throw it up at the rim. He can get you 10 assists in his sleep, and then he could be another closer. And he can get to the free throw line. He's shooting 90%. So he is in the A tier for me because he makes this team better, and they are a bona fide team in the East now. You wouldn't be surprised with everything they have to see them make the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I'm definitely rooting for them to win the championship if it's not going to be the Clippers, and you wouldn't imagine it is going to be at this stage. So I love James Harden. He was a great Clipper. He's someone I'm going to be looking at the end of his career very fondly back on. We'll move on though to the Dallas Mavericks, Drew, who sold at the deadline, much like the Clippers, to be fair, much down there in the Western Conference as well. Anthony Davis out, Jaden Hardy out, D'Angelo Russell and Dante Exum all out. Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, Tyus Jones and Marvin Bagley in with a couple of picks there. Just again, sold at the right time, similar to the Atlanta Hawks. I think I probably wouldn't put them quite as like high as the Atlanta Hawks. I don't know, maybe actually, like they've got a good return for AD. And I don't know how much AD is going to contribute over in Washington. We can talk about that more when we flip over to Washington. I think they're probably like B or C for me.
Well, let me try to sell you if I can, because it's been very, very controversial. And, this whole Luka thing has come up again because it's this is all you got for Luka Doncic. And, because AD never lived up to his part of the bargain. They shipped him out. But however, I give the new crew there in Dallas a lot of applause for their courage, because you just watch. Sometimes it's just better to just. I hate a lot of times when these teams make trades and they try to force it, right? They try to force it for PR stunts to make, to save face. But look, everybody and their mama know that this AD thing wasn't the right move, and they say, you know what? We put our hands up. Let's just wash our hands. Let's move on, although we got 3 first-round fake picks. But look, it's all about the Cooper Flag era now. You get worse. You put yourself in a position to get a lottery pick, build around Cooper Flag, and move on and move forward, which is a better story. The worst-case scenario would be is that you're not bad enough, right? And you make the play in and you don't get a lottery pick. And that would be an awful position for Dallas. And you move on from AD in the future anyway, because they weren't going to pay him anyway. So for that reason alone, I actually put them above Atlanta. Like, I love that they're going all in on Cooper Flag, washing their hands. And they're doing it now, not waiting till the distraction of next year's offseason, whereas next year's offseason will be focused on who are we drafting, not what are we going to do with AD. So with that part of it, I am keeping them really high on that. Don't know if I sold you.
Yeah, I like that angle that you've mentioned there, like the idea of not being too stubborn, completely cutting ties. I mean, it sounds like now Mark Cuban's trying to buy the team back as well, so like a roller coaster year or just over a year now for the Dallas Mavericks organization. I guess part of why I was initially looking at it in a bad way is that you didn't necessarily get like player return in terms of what can be the next iteration of the Dallas Mavericks, whereas Atlanta got Jonathan Kuminga, which again question marks about the fit as you mentioned, but he can in theory be a part of that next sort of core of the Atlanta Hawks. But then Dallas got a great return in terms of picks. And,
I don't want to put anyone in Cooper Flag's way. I want to make sure he has this whole season to develop on his own as the guy, and then you build around him. You could argue that you could have brought in a young piece from Washington to help him, but I don't want to take anything away from what he's doing now. This year's a wash. Let's just allow him to keep getting these reps physically and then mentally getting that hey, I am the guy, I am the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to try and check quickly if those picks are Washington picks as well, because I mean with the Anthony Davis timeline and the health being the way it is, if they are Washington picks, then they are potentially very valuable. But I'm happy to put Dallas above Atlanta into B. You've completely sold me there, Drew. So we'll move on next to the Denver Nuggets, who do next to nothing at the deadline. Really, they get in a second from Brooklyn, but it ends up being a swap for this. They get one in 2026 to swap away one in 2032, and Hunter Tyson goes out, as I mentioned before, but he's already been waived by Brooklyn. A team that I don't think we're ever really going to be buyers, didn't need to buy, just need to get healthy and end up doing nothing, and probably just end up being like a C or D here, Drew. Maybe C because they just didn't need to do anything and they didn't.
Yeah, I'm happy with C because this team trade deadline was 4 out of the 5 starters or 5 out of the 5 starters at a time getting injured, because what it's done is it's uncovered a couple of those young guys that have come out of the abyss and have been starring. So this is going to give that team a lot more confidence and much more dangerous come playoff time, because now you got a legitimate second unit of guys who know that they can do it. So that's their trade deadline. Don't tinker with that. Just maybe you upgrade the physio staff somewhere on the market. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if they've done that in the background. But like in regards to making any moves, that stand put is the best thing they could do.
Yeah, absolutely fair. We'll move on to the Detroit Pistons, another contender up there with Denver. They bring in Kevin Huerter, they lose Jaden Ivey. When you talk about, correcting things that they need to correct, Kevin Huerter's not had a good three-point shooting year, but he can definitely contribute more in that sense than Jaden Ivey. I think he's not going to get paid in the same way that Jaden Ivey would have been hoping to in the off-season either. Jaden Ivey's been, sort of the odd man out really on that Detroit Pistons roster. I just quite like that they've kind of, again, eliminated question marks, didn't buy when everyone was putting pressure on them to buy, really. I'm tempted to put them like high C, low B with Detroit. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the fact that they addressed the shooting with Huerter, but I still have question marks if he can make shots when you really need them. So is he the right shooter? That's my question. I love the fact that they've washed their hands with Ivy, because Dennis Jenkins is much better, who they just converted to a full-time player, by the way. So by getting rid of Ivy, you've upgraded that spot with a former two-way player. So I'm torn. I love all the moves. I'm still have questions if it's the right shooter. So for that perspective alone, somewhere in the B behind Boston, somewhere-ish, I'm happy. But right moves, let's see if it's the right personnel.
Yeah, absolutely. Golden State Warriors up next. I mentioned that Porzingis health thing is a genuine concern for me, and like a concern for Porzingis, of course, like whether he'll ever recover to be an elite level NBA player from this. I don't know if Golden State have, made this trade with the idea that like he might, whether they've got any intel on that. Of course, players have to go through medicals and things like that whenever this happens, but it might just be, Drew, that Porzingis has gone through this medical there, and the Golden State Warriors are not expecting him to hit an NBA court in a big way anytime soon. They just kind of wanted to get off this Kuminga situation, and if it's in that sense, I can kind of frame this through a different angle. I mean, it's sad to lose Buddy Hield at the same time, but you had to attach something else to Jonathan Kuminga on the way out. I don't know. I'm so torn on the Golden State Warriors. Like I'm probably tempted to put this down as the first team in D, only because like getting rid of Kuminga is like all well and good. I just don't know if Porzingis is able to play basketball in the way that like Golden State fans might think he's able to.
Yeah, don't hesitate, man. Go with your guts. Stick them right there in D. Give them a house and home right where they belong, because all this talk about Kuminga for the whole season, and this is all you got? This is all you got? Like, Porzingis, the best version of himself? Yeah, okay, but we know we have yet to see that in his entire NBA career. He brings the court spacing that they need, but he's banged up. You got Al Horford, who's playing great, but he's old. So, and then we know Porzingis isn't a defender. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to outscore people when it comes to the playoffs? This does not help their championship aspirations whatsoever. I like the fact that they just finally decide to get rid of Kuminga, but it just felt like they were forced to because they just got tired of it, right? And so they went and got rid of that nagging girlfriend for an ugly girl. You could have just, you could have brought in something a little bit better. And so for that, I'm disappointed with Golden State. Stick them there in D.
Yeah, I think I go along with everything you've said there. Sold low on Kuminga as well, and only have themselves to blame for that, really. Especially if Porzingis isn't going to be a proper contributor to this Golden State Warriors roster, then they've sold incredibly low on Kuminga when I'm sure you could have got a return for him from somewhere. So I would say a disappointing deadline from a team that maybe could have been buying. Who knows? I think we're all sad to see the end of Steph Curry's career, kind of like petering out a little bit in terms of what Golden State is able to do in championship contention, but maybe there'll be something big in the offseason to come from them. Who knows? We'll move on, though, to the Houston Rockets, who must already have one eye on the offseason, Drew, because they've done nothing here. Big couple of injuries now with Steve Adams out for the season. Fred VanVleet, we obviously knew coming into the season would be out for the season too. It means you've lost your number one playmaker, and now the guy who was effectively like the identity of the Houston Rockets was, we'll miss shots, we'll put them up though, and Steve Adams will rebound them. I don't know where I stand on Houston at all in terms of contention. They're definitely a tier below Denver and OKC for me, and maybe in that sense they are just best to like keep their powder dry and wait till the off season, wait till guys get healthy, and kind of say like, this is just an unhealthy season, we'll see what we can do in the playoffs, we like what we've got. There's part of me that just wonders if there was something they could have done to address some of the holes that are there in the roster right now.
Yeah, this is a situation that's very hard to assess, right? I mean, if we're going on our tiers, they're in D, but they're not worse than Golden State, right? Because
I think so.
We won't know exactly where their trade deadline movement or lack thereof lies until June, right? So I like the fact that they are valuing Fred VanVleet, not only as a player, but like the role that he's playing now. He's doing a lot. He is really active on those benches if you watch Houston Rockets games. And so it is very glaring that they need that organizer there at the quarterback position, because a lot of times, at the end of games, they get really messy. And then lately, they've been getting exposed, specifically with Amon Thompson. They've been putting centers on him and just slacking off in the paint. So his lack of shooting is really, really hurting them. And you can get away with it in the regular season, but we know in the playoffs that gets magnified and really exposed. So, yeah, I mean, I like the fact that they're saying, okay, let's see how far we can go with this group. And I think in the offseason, they're going to have to make a decision on Amon Thompson, even Şengün, of like, where they really go with this group. But I like the fact that they didn't panic and they're giving it time to really see what they need. Because the playoffs will tell you what you need, just like with Jalen Green. After Jalen Green's playoff series last year with Golden State, it was very clear that he needed to be shipped off. How do you average 20 plus games and then in the playoffs you go 4 games and you don't get double figures? So the playoffs will tell the Rockets where they need to go. So let's stick them in D, and that is a remain to be seen.
Yeah, TBC on the Houston Rockets, and the team who are also TBC in so many ways. It's funny that these two are coming back to back, really. It's the Indiana Pacers, and they'll be closely followed by the Los Angeles Clippers in our rankings here. And two of the sort of hallmark teams of this trade deadline, really, Drew. The Pacers bring in Ivica Zubac and Kobe Brown from the Clippers. I just can't say enough how much I love Ivica Zubac, how great I think Ivica Zubac is. I genuinely think he's top 5 in centers in basketball right now. I think the return, some people may have like boggled at it a little bit. Personally, when I first saw it, I was like, is that not a little bit low? Like, that's how good I think Ivica Zubac is. But you get Benedict Mathurin back, or you give Benedict Mathurin back if you're the Indiana Pacers. So we'll come on to talk about what he can maybe do for the Clippers. But in terms of getting in Ivica Zubac, Drew, Kobe Brown, probably a non-factor, but neither was Isaiah Jackson, who they've let go of. Kobe Brown will get, I'm sure, a lot of run time to end the season. I'm not sure Ivica Zubac will, because they'll put him on ice now for when Tyrese Halliburton gets back next season. They'll have a lot of fun together, those two. I'm tempted to put these in at A, probably just behind Cleveland.
Yep, 100%. I got them in A, behind Cleveland. I mean, how they maneuvered this trade deadline was excellence, because they're looking towards the future, right? They're looking towards next season, that they'll be right back where they left off last year. And then they're saying to themselves, because they were the fastest team in the NBA during that NBA Finals run, they're saying, we're going to be a little bit slower because our superstar is coming after Achilles injury. So we need to play a little bit more half-court basketball. So with Zubac, you could do that. A big frame who can set nice big screens, gobble up some offensive rebounds where he's solid in. And then you got a big fella in the middle that can combat the bigs in the East. So you got someone to match up against Cat, because you got to think New York Knicks are going to be players next year. You also got someone to go against Jalen Duren for Detroit for the future as well. You got someone to go with the Twin Towers in Cleveland. So I love how they looked at the top teams in the East and said, these are going to be the guys we're going to be battling for the next couple years. Let's make sure we got some meat and potatoes to kind of combat that. And then we also have someone on the offensive end we can play half-court basketball with. But then just in case, let's just make sure that we leave ourselves a little wiggle room just in case we get that 1 through 4 pick for the lottery. I mean, because, those 4 guys are generational talents. But if you fall outside of the top 5, right, you can argue that you take Zubac over anybody else in the draft right now, right? Right now. Whereas those other 4 guys, like, you can't pass on them now, even though, like, they may need time to develop, but they're, major franchise cornerstone pieces. So they maneuvered around it perfectly. Shout out to Indiana. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Indiana and shout out to Ivica Zubac, one of my favourite Clippers of all time. But we'll move on to talk about my Clippers in terms of what they got in. Well, I guess, we can talk about the outs of James Harden and Chris Paul finally sort of getting off that issue and leaving that in the rearview mirror now. Sad the way that's ended for Chris, really. He's, been waived by Toronto and maybe doesn't find his way back onto a team in his final season, which is a sad way for it to end. But I guess none of the Clippers concerned now, unfortunately, which again is just a really sad state of affairs. But in terms of what the Clippers do get in, they bring in Benedict Mathurin, who I've got some question marks about, but I'm kind of happy to see how that just plays out, because he's a young guy with a lot of potential upside. Isaiah Jackson, I have no real idea about. He could end up being a non-factor for the Clippers. He could end up being almost Montrezl Harrell-like in terms of like an undersized big who likes to crash the glass and all those kinds of things. And then Darius Garland, who I'm a big fan of. Like, I love this for the Clippers. I love that they were able to get Darius Garland for James Harden and also a second round pick in that, getting 2 firsts in. alongside Benedict Mathurin, of course, as you mentioned, Drew. There's a bit of a protection war going on, which is just like the fact that the draft lottery is even in my like mind as a date to highlight in the calendar now is just some turn up for the Bucks. But I will be watching that night because I'll be wanting to see if the Clippers end up getting this pick between 5 and 9, or whether it is indeed the Pacers who are going to take it. But I really like the Clippers' business. I think the Clippers had to find a time to sell. You know, there may be more to come from all of this as well in terms of Kawhi and aspiration and all that kind of stuff. So I'd probably put the Clippers just ahead of the Dallas Mavericks in B. I don't know how you feel.
Wow, we're aligned, except I have them behind the Pacers in A. Because there are some question marks, but what they've done is they've given themselves some flexibility because Mathurin is a restricted free agent, so you get a chance to see, okay, can he be part of our future? We know he's a young guy, a scorer, and you can decide. If someone matches your offer, then you can say good riddance with Mathurin, right? The big question is with Garland. He's 10 years younger than Harden. So I love the fact that they got younger because they were the oldest team in the league, along with being the second slowest in the league. And I love the fact, as you mentioned, Josh, that they sold high because this caught everybody off guard, right? But there is a term that we must not forget that it's called fool's gold. So, were we really expecting the Clippers to come out of the West? I don't think many people did, right? And so, this run that they're on, it is fool's gold. And then let's say that you do all of this, you get flamed out in the first round, and then you're left at the altar with nothing, right? They had no draft picks, no future, nothing. So now they have flexibility, a possible 5 through 10 first-round pick, 2 young guys that you could possibly build around, but possibly not. So you kept Kawhi as well, which I'll really be interested to see how they maneuver around his contract because he's up for an extension. I would make sure it's a team-friendly deal with the team option. I would not leave this in his hands to have all the control. But I think for that standpoint, they're in a much better position now and in the future than they were, during this losing streak back in November.
Yeah, absolutely. All the flexibility in the world. I feel really good about it as a Clippers fan. Like, it's made the sort of tankathon era of the NBA, if we want to call it what this is, exciting for me and my sort of personal interest as a Clippers fan. But, excitement for the future as well, because that was the one thing I definitely had bigger question marks around, and some of those questions have been answered now. But we'll flip over from Inglewood to downtown LA, the Los Angeles Lakers, Drew, who bring in Luke Kennard, get rid of Gabe Vincent, who's been a non-factor for them for a little while now. I kind of have to issue a bit of a warning to Lakers fans, because you might think you've got all the shooting in the world in Luke Kennard because of percentage 3-pointers. I promise you, Luke Kennard is a very, very frustrating shooter to watch because his stroke is so clean, his form is nice, they go in like no man's business. The trouble is he refuses to take more than 3 of them a game. If he took more than 3 a game, I'd be putting the Lakers up in B here, Drew. But because of the fact that I just don't see how he ever shoots volume, I'm tempted to just put this in C, just around that sort of middle tier of C. What do you think?
I have them in C between Charlotte and Brooklyn because although they got a better threat from outside, but what you just alluded to, Luke Kennard just refuses to shoot the basketball, right? Mm-hmm. And if he refuses to shoot the basketball in Atlanta when no one's watching, what do you think he's going to do under the bright lights in Hollywood when you got Sylvester Stallone sitting right there? You got Denzel Washington right there, and the lights are really bright, and you got all of L.A. chanting for you. You got to make this one shot that LeBron makes this hook pass to in the corner. All percentages aren't equal, So the weight of that shot is a lot different in L.A., and so with that, I need to see it to believe it. And despite that, it's not like he makes them a championship contender now. He just makes them a little bit more reliable during the regular season, and that's all.
Yeah, kind of just like a a shoulder shrug of a trade for me from the Lakers. Really, like I don't think they were going to get into championship contention. You could have argued they should have been bigger buyers, but they didn't really have the assets to do that either. So they needed 3-point shooting. They got 3-point shooting. They still need defense. Luke Kennard does not bring defense. So I'll be interested to see how that all plays out for the Lakers. Really,
you know what it really is? It's when like you've had plans to kind of snuggle up in your home and watch TV all night, but then all your boys are like, hey, we're going out. Hey, we're going here. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. And they're like, nah, come on. And you reluctantly throw on your clothes and you're like, go out, but you're not happy. You don't want to be there, right? And that's what the Lakers did. They didn't really want to do it. They saw everyone else making these moves because this trade came really late in the deadline. It was like, well, I guess I'll put on something and go out and have a drink. That's all this was.
I love the analogy there. I'm completely on board with it as well. We'll move on though from the Lakers to the Memphis Grizzlies, who ended up being active sellers at the trade deadline. They're getting 3 future firsts for Jaren Jackson Jr. being the sort of headline of that. Really, I don't know where to go with Memphis, Drew, because like the core is not there for the future yet. So I can't put them as high as like Charlotte or Brooklyn. They get a good return for Jaren Jackson Jr. I think in the end, like 3 firsts, I just think is a good return. I'm still not overly convinced on Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm kind of not even convinced on his fit in Utah. Utah just becomes an absolutely ginormous team. And I'll be interested to see what Will Hardy does with that next season. But from Memphis' point of view, I think I'm probably behind Denver in C, if not Heidi.
Yeah, I think what do we have? Denver. Yeah, I definitely have them in C for the fact that they got a haul. Like in the last 2.
Yeah.
Well, we just got to go by this trade deadline. Can't focus on last year's where they got 4 first-round picks. But we have to take that into context because along with that in Jaren Jackson, they now have 8 or 7, I believe. So they got a bright future. However, like, that's all irrelevant until you figure out what happens with Morant, right? Because could you imagine building young and you having all this young talent and you have all these cornerstones and you got Morant there? Like, Morant is the culture, and they need to change the culture. Like, they need to completely wash their hands with the culture, and you cannot have him having an influence on the new culture. So right now, those first-round draft picks are irrelevant to me until you get rid of Morant, but I do give them credit for what they got. So right now, I have them the low C, behind Denver. Yeah, right there.
Cool. Another team that did nothing at the deadline, Miami, complete non-factor for me. I think they needed to get better, and I don't think they did. I don't know really like what moves they could have made. They were linked with so many players, but Miami kind of always are as well. I think I'd probably have them in D behind the Rockets, probably, just because I think the Rockets have got better, like a better chance of achieving success this season. How do you feel, Drew?
Exactly there, because Golden State decision was a head scratcher, although Miami's decision to not do anything is a head scratcher. But it's just I'm not sure what they're trying to do for the future, and they're just going to be where they always are, just kind of 7th and 8th and scrape by the playoffs. And sooner or later, you gotta either be in or you gotta be out, and they just kind of been stuck in this space. So yeah, right there in between the two.
And we'll move on to the Milwaukee Bucks, who I think some of us may have considered to be really active movers at the deadline, end up doing nothing. And like I said, there may be an argument to eliminate the F tier, Drew, and to have the Chicago Bulls as bottom of all of this. And we don't usually curse very much on this podcast, and we definitely don't curse in back-to-back sentences or words. But this shit with the Milwaukee Bucks pissed me off so much, with this whole like Giannis trolling coming out with the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. The fact that they did nothing in the end, and he's saying like, "Oh, I'm not the chaser, I'm the asset," and stuff like that. Like, just so much BS to me with this Milwaukee Bucks franchise. Like, they should have sold or bought. They end up doing neither. Like, I want to put them in F just because they wound me up so much.
Put them there. That's where they belong.
Let's do this.
Because they're that friend that says, hey, Josh, hey, do you want to go to Spain in the summer? And you say, yeah. And every month they keep saying, hey, we going, right? And they keep checking in. And then you get to the summer and and you got your hopes up all high. You've been organized, and they say, I can't go. Like that one friend that wants to organize all the holidays, the boys' holidays, but the first to pull out. Like, you made all this noise, I was just minding my business. Like I wasn't thinking about Giannis. Y'all made me think about Giannis and all this distraction to then be what? Nowhere. It's just stupid. And then what Giannis is doing afterwards, he's really vocal about his investments, but will be vocal about getting out of there. Like, yeah, keep him in F.
Yeah, I don't think we'd ever end up in a scenario where we're like hating Giannis Antetokounmpo on this podcast, but it will die off eventually, Giannis, I'm sure. But for right now, you're very low on my list of
Put your big boy boots
likable
on,
people.
man.
Exactly. We'll move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who end up picking up Ayo Dosunmu from the Chicago Bulls. They let go of Mike Conley and eventually re-sign him in a move that I just like really like. Like I always wonder what that's like for NBA players when like did Mike Conley have his apartment packed up and suddenly started like unpacking boxes? Had he actually like gone to any of the places between the 3 or 4 that he got traded to? There's Ousmane Dieng who was traded all around the place, by the way, who ended up on the Bucks, and then I think he was on like 5 teams, Ousmane Dieng at the deadline. So I'm sorry that he's in the F tier Milwaukee Bucks, but I like these moves from Minnesota. They keep their point guard in Mike Conley. They use him moving around to get assets, and Ayo Dosunmu is a good combo guard, good defensively, matches the profile of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which is a profile that I think they needed to replace. There's still question marks I have with the Timberwolves, but they've answered some of those questions. I'd put them high B.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean on you because, in all honesty, I don't know much about Io. I have not come across him at all, really, so I don't know what he brings. But you got to think he brings more than Rob Dilliam. For whatever reason, he just never landed in Chris Finch's rotation, and they desperately needed a point guard. So I'm gonna lean on you of how much they upgraded, but you got to assume that it is an upgrade.
Yeah, I think it is a big upgrade. I put them up at the top of B there. I could be talked down a little bit from that, but I just think they had to get better and did, basically. I forgot to put Rob Dillingham in the outside on the fact file, so I'm pleased that you pointed that out as well. New Orleans Pelicans bring in Dalen Terry, plus 2 seconds and some cash. Jose Alvarado goes out. A selling team that didn't sell, Drew. I think I'm down in D for them, possibly even down to E, but I don't know. They didn't wind me up quite as much as the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, I put him in E for the simple fact that you didn't do anything and you don't have a future, right? You have a huge prize asset there with Troy Murphy where you could have gobbled 2 or 3 first-round picks or a young guy to be more aligned with those other guys, or even offloading on Zion, striking while the iron's hot, because he's been playing really, really well, but we know that it's not sustainable. He hasn't shown us anything that he could do this over the long haul. So I would have found something for him as well and just went all in on Derek Queen. But for that reason, you don't. You're in the bottom of the league. You have no draft picks next year. What are we doing? D.
Yep.
E, sorry.
Absolutely.
E.
Yeah, put them just ahead of the Chicago Bulls in there, because I think we can all agree that the Bulls are just losers, unfortunately. Yeah. If I'm putting my big boy boots on, as Drew advised me to do. So we'll move on to the New York Knicks, who got in Jose Alvarado, flipped Dalen Terry a couple of times, got rid of Gershon Yabusele, got a hard-nosed guy in Jose Alvarado, someone who I can imagine getting the guard and rocking during the playoffs. Got rid of Gershon Yabusele, who's been one of the stranger stories of the season, really. I think C for the Knicks, probably just ahead of the Lakers, maybe. Are you going lower?
That low? I really like the fact that they brought Alvarado on. He's
really?
a game.
Okay.
He's an X factor.
Yeah.
I
guess they gave up nothing either.
They didn't give up anything to get an X factor, which I'm not sure if you watched that Boston game, but there was one play, and it was all over Twitter as well, where he X'd out to switch out on Brunson's man defensively, because they were trying to get Brunson matched up with Brown, right? So they were going to have a ball screen because all these defenses just switch. But he actually went and switched out Brunson so they could switch onto him and guard Jaylen Brown. And that's defense intelligence, which is required in the playoffs if you're going to make some runs, because we know Brunson isn't the greatest defender. He's one of those guys that's going to win you a game because he's low maintenance. He doesn't need the ball. He does all those intangibles, and you gave up nothing. He's an upgrade from the two-way player that they have, Tyler Kolek. So for me, man, I really, B, definitely B behind Detroit.
I've gone with Lobie in the end behind Detroit, as
Yeah.
you say. It's a cool pickup. Like I love just the sort of energy of that pickup. Really, like I think it just brings good energy to the Garden. He's good for the Knicks. I'm happy to get behind that. We'll move on to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who trade initially Ousmane Dieng, who, as I say, ends up on about 5 different teams in the meantime. They get in Mason Plumlee but waive him, and then Jared McCain, who's someone I'm really intrigued by with the OKC Thunder because he's not someone who needs sort of paying anytime soon, and that was maybe why Philadelphia sold a little early on him. I didn't like Daryl Morey's comments, like that becomes bulletin board material straight away for Jared McCain, really. But someone who I think could light a fire under himself off the bench, and OKC needs bench offense, they need offense in general. So I like this pickup for them. I'm tempted to go with sort of B. I'd maybe even put them behind the Knicks in B. Actually, Drew, how do you feel about that?
I actually, I mean, to be honest, I actually like them in A behind Clippers, and here's why. Because, and this is why, we can agree that they're a bona fide championship caliber team, right? Without this pickup. And they just made a small tweak to their roster just to tighten things up, just to tighten up the loose ends, which probably the weakness with OKC is shooting. That's why when they went through those struggles, it was because teams were sitting in the zone, right? They are more of a use their defense to create offense, get out in transition, and then give the ball to SGA and take us home. And, they are really, really streaky from outside. And one thing McCain can do is he can shoot. Like, he's been shooting 40% since he's been back in a groove as of late. And like you mentioned, you gave up a first-round pick, but you got 50 of them. He's not owed any money anytime soon. So you took a very small risk just to tighten up some loose ends, which it might be the difference between you repeating. So moves like that, which doesn't seem really big, I don't take that lightly. Like, I take that as a championship team, not staying put. Like, we're just going to tweak things just to put ourselves in a little better position to so it's different from Cleveland because Cleveland's moves were loud. This was quiet, but this is an A move for me.
I'm happy to go with A. I was tempted to not put them ahead of Minnesota because I really like the IO pickup, but Minnesota still has bigger question marks. And the way you've made me come around to A tier there is that the Thunder just have nowhere near as many question marks. Like, the one is, as you say, a bit of an offensive spark, and hopefully Jared McCain can provide that. It would be a really nice story if he could. He just seems like a good guy. I really like Jared McCain and his positivity. So if he can help OKC win another championship, then I'm not really going to grumble at that because I kind of thought OKC would at the start of the season anyway. So
here's the last thing on that, because you mentioned that, and I don't want to gloss over that. He will be highly motivated, right? Like, he's a TikTok guy and he's eccentric and he does all these things. But if you watch that press conference and if you've been an athlete before, those comments by Daryl Morey stung him. He was speechless because you got to think about this draft process. There's a lot of investment that goes on. You don't think that you know how much time Daryl Morey spent with him during the draft process before picking him up? And all of a sudden you're just going to be like, oh, we so high. That hurt him. He's going to be highly motivated, so watch out.
Yeah, absolutely all fair. I've gone with them at the bottom of A, which is we'll see what Jared McCain can do. I'm definitely excited to see him with the fire lit underneath him. We'll move on to the Orlando Magic, who I feel sorry, sort of like trashing them as much as I want to trash them, really, Drew, because we had Dante on the pod and I was supporting them going into those NBA Global games. I'm just surprised they've not done anything at the deadline, really. Like, I don't think this is a team that should be standing pat. If they stand pat now and do stuff in the off season, then I'm happy to kind of TBC on this. They get off Tyus Jones, who I think had been a bit of a problem for them this season, but they get nothing in return for that. Just like strange vibes with Orlando. I'm tempted to go down into maybe D or even E. I could be talked into with them because I think they should have done something.
They are in that Houston Rockets, Miami range where you did nothing, where you need to do something because this roster isn't good enough. They can't shoot. You got they gave up 4 draft round picks. So you're all in on the now, right? So you got to win now. You got to make a decision now. The East is as wide open as it's ever been. And they had an opportunity to make a move, they didn't, and it's going to come back to bite them. So I put them right there in that little range there of teams who did nothing, and it's like, well, you needed to do something.
Yeah, I've put them ahead of Miami, which is a flip of a coin, but literally just in terms of the fact that they're ahead of them in the standings at the moment. So two teams that did nothing, but Orlando is like a game better at the moment or something at best. So we'll move on to the Philadelphia 76ers, who like kind of a strange deadline in a way. Like I understand why you maybe needed to trade Jared McCain, like you want to pay Quentin Grimes in the summer. He's won the battle of the guards in terms of him versus Jared McCain, if that had to become a thing this season. Strange one for Philadelphia, and like the Paul George suspension and all these things make like not very much able to happen anyway. I think like a team that did nothing, that maybe doesn't need to do something because maybe this season has just gone better than expected anyway. So like high D probably.
Yeah, I don't really know where to put them because they got lucky. Like that Paul George thing saved them because now they're able to convert Dominique Barlow, who was a two-way player who has been excellent for them. It's gone under the radar. He's been a two-way player for those guys, and he's kind of like a young PG who can guard, who's long, and so without that move, it's really poor. But that situation kind of saved them. So, yeah, they put them in no man's land with the no man's land teams.
Yeah, we'll move on to Phoenix next, who bring in Cole Anthony and Amir Coffey and get rid of Nigel Hayes-Davis and Nick Richards. I don't have a whole lot to say on these trades, to be honest. Like, Nick Richards was part of a glut of centres there, but the most undersized of all their centres. Cole Anthony's, a good ball handler who's shot terribly this season. I'm thinking, sort of C or D tier again here, Drew.
Yeah, I don't see them in the 76ers Houston range. I see them in the low C tier because that trade is irrelevant. It did nothing, but this team is kind of fine where they are. They're not a contender. They're not bad. They're just better than last year, and they're competitive, and they're right where they need to be. So with that, and they don't have Jalen Green back yet, so you don't actually know where you are, so you don't want to do too much. So I kind of like them in that low C range.
Yeah, we'll move on to Portland, who do one move, Vic Krejci for Diop Reith. Diop Reith already been waived, so like you gave up a non-factor for someone who I think can be a big factor for them. Drew, I'm tempted to go like top of C, bottom of B here with Portland.
Yeah, I like what Portland did. They brought in a shooter to continue to build around those two stars they have. Not I can't put them above the Knicks because the Knicks are a contender. Yeah, I like them. I say C. I say C. Yeah, ahead of Charlotte. Yeah, I can't put them in B, but a little small tweak to get a little bit better because they could have easily been like these other teams and trying to get worse, and they clearly didn't.
Yeah, Sacramento up next, a team that just feels nailed to be in that C tier with New Orleans and Chicago. Like, kind of need to do something, kind of didn't. DeAndre Hunter, meh, E.
I mean, yeah, I'm shocked you didn't put him as an F.
Oh, really? Okay, you think an F?
I mean,
I can be talked into F.
I mean,
they gave up 2 second-round picks.
Like, what are they doing? And you didn't offload on any of the old heads. They are just in a very awkward situation, and they're currently on a 14-game losing streak as we speak. They're F, man. Like they're with Milwaukee with me, where your season has been beyond poor. And again, I said this on a previous, and this is respectfully, if Russell Westbrook's been your best player on your team, it's kind of a problem. And he was picked up off the street, so roster construction is very questionable at the moment. So I leave him with the F.
Yeah, I'm fine with F. Sacramento just feels like one of the F'est teams in all of NBA basketball.
And I'm sure their fans would agree.
We'll move on to the San Antonio Spurs, who do nothing, shouldn't have done anything. A lot of talk about them being buyers. I'm glad they weren't. I'm glad they weren't in the Giannis sweepstakes. I'd go behind Portland and C for the Spurs doing nothing, Drew.
Yeah. You want to put them in C?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, did nothing, didn't need to do anything. Good team. It's not as good as like Portland picking up Krejci, I don't think, but it's better than like, the Hornets who stood pat for example, because they're more of a winning team basically.
Yeah.
All the teams in B feel like they did something.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like they're right where they need to be. Nothing wrong with what they did. Obviously, they didn't do any. They're fine where they are. Yeah, I'm happy there.
And then Toronto, who bring in Trace Jackson-Davis, Chris Paul, who they just waived straight away. They got rid of OG Agbaji, and a couple of seconds in there. Again, one that I don't have like very strong opinions on. I'd probably put them like somewhere in D, maybe just ahead of Golden State in D.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about their moves of what it's done for them. They've been the story of the year, and maybe it's a situation where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like they're that gritty team. We don't want to make any noise. Don't talk about us. I don't want you to know about us, and that's a good thing going into the playoffs. Like let's be mysterious. I like that they're mysterious and they didn't try to tweak what got them here. So, yeah, I'm happy.
Should we go low C maybe because they've been better than expected as well. So
yeah, I like C. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll move on to the Utah Jazz, who ended up being big buyers, really, at the deadline in terms of getting in Jaren Jackson Jr. They still get to tank this season. They still get to do everything with those picks. It's such a hard one for me to rank because the Jaren Jackson Jr. fit just feels so strange to me. But, like, you can't argue that they didn't get better. And, like, do I think that Walton Clayton Jr. was going to be a factor in the future? No. Do I think Taylor Hendricks was going to be? No. The other guys are all guys who weren't going to be. You give up first round picks, but again, like I don't know how mad I'd feel about that if I'm a Utah Jazz fan.
Yeah, I like them above Atlanta and Dallas behind Minnesota because they clearly got better with Jaren Jackson Jr. We don't know how much better, right? And there's going to still be bad enough where they get a lottery pick. Like it's the best of both worlds. They're positioning themselves as major players for next season. They've gone all in on Keontae George. And, yeah, I really like where they are, even though they have question marks. So I don't like them as much as Minnesota's move because that propels them in the playoffs. But I like them that same kind of scenario with Dallas, that you've decided that, hey, next year is us. I like that.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to put them just above Dallas for now. Then, like it's another TBC, but as we said, there's so many tanking teams now. There's so many TBCs, and we'll finish off with one more than Drew. One more tanking team that is also a TBC, the Washington Wizards, who bring in Anthony Davis, Jaden Hardy, D'Angelo Russell, who looks set to be waived, Dante Exum, who's already been waived, and Trae Young, and get rid of basically a bunch of guys who weren't really contributing anyway. 2 firsts, 3 seconds to Dallas as part of that AD trade. I've got big question marks about Washington in terms of like what that future looks like. I don't think the fits are all necessarily there. Like they're saying they think Alex Sarr's a 4, but AD hates being a 5. Do Trae Young and AD work together as like, you know, pick and roll things? I can kind of see that in some scenario in my head, but does it take away from guys like Trey Johnson? Possibly a little bit too much for my liking. So I'm looking at like maybe low B might be too high. Maybe I'm having them as a C. How do you feel?
I really like what they've done.
Really?
Yeah, because
I liked Trae Young. I don't think I like AD as much, really.
Yeah, well, hear me out. You didn't give up any of your younger players. None of that core 4. You didn't give up any of your own future first round picks. You're still in the potential race to get another lottery pick next year, a top 4 pick. And the AD and Trae Young thing, you haven't signed them to extensions. You haven't agreed to extensions. So it's a very low risk move to say, hey, let's see what we look like. And if you don't like it, you can move off of it. You're not married to either one of them. And with AD, people argue that, oh, he's going to be injured. There's no pressure. Like you have Sarr as a 5. Like if they're there together, great. If he's not there, like it's business as usual. So you pick up 2 perennial all-star guys for basically nothing, really, and you get to see what it looks like. You get to try it before you buy it. And so without hedging your future, and you left yourself flexibility, like I like them in that high B range. Like I like them in I put them in the Utah Jazz, Dallas kind of mode where you're going to still pick up something nice next year. You're going to be good next year. You got your young pieces. Like I love what they did.
I might hedge a little deal with you, Andrew. If we put Washington up in B, can it be the bottom half of B, and then can we also bump Portland and San Antonio up to the bottom of B? How do you feel about that?
So move Portland and San Antonio up.
I think so. I'm just looking at the teams that are kind of behind that, and I like San Antonio were being persuaded into being buyers similar to Detroit were, and I just feel like standing pat was a good thing
San
for
Antonio,
them to do.
yes. San Antonio, yes. I put
Portland for getting
Portland and
Vit.
Charlotte in the same tier because they're
Right.
not great teams that made small tweaks
Okay, I
right
like that.
towards
And
the
then we'll
future. Yeah.
put Washington after Atlanta, then maybe there
Yep.
in front of
Yep.
Boston. Yeah,
Yep.
cool.
That looks
Well,
good.
that is our finished, I should say, tier list. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. It took us a little bit longer than the 2025 one did. I was kind of surprised, but we had a lot to talk about. There was so much to talk about from that trade deadline. So, Drew, I guess we should round this off then with understated stories from the trade deadline from the past week in general, really. If you want to take the rock on this first, because I know you had something in mind, then I'm happy to take it in terms of bold predictions and a little bit of talk about All-Star Weekend.
Yeah. Underrated story is what happened last night as we're recording on Tuesday, February 10th, is that brawl last night between Detroit Pistons and who was it again? Remind me.
And the Charlotte Hornets.
And the Charlotte Hornets.
My guy
yes.
Moussa Diabate, such a nice guy. I can't believe how much of a fight he got in.
You know, beef stew. The Detroit Pistons concern me because I'm not sure if they will be in a position to have controlled emotions when it comes to the playoffs, because you're going to always, the emotion's going to be at an all-time high. And can you control those emotions? I'm not sure what beef stew, but I will say this. I love this as a first-round matchup, and it's potentially could happen because Charlotte's in the play-in. They could easily end up as an 8th seed, and I'd love to see it again. But, that underrated story that comes out of it is Detroit mature enough to take advantage of the position and the hand they've been dealt this season? So we shall see. Let's keep an eye on that.
Absolutely, we shall see. That idea of that first round matchup has got me going, Drew. That is definitely enough to get us excited. I'm going to take a slightly different direction with my understated story here. I'm going to go with the Bulls because we've kind of done them down really by putting them in E in this tier list, but all season whenever I've spoke to Chicago Bulls fans or heard from Chicago Bulls fans, they've been wanting Matas Buzelis to get minutes, and now he's able to, he's in a position where this guard heavy roster means that he can play as one of the forward options. I just like what Matas is going to be able to do for the Bulls. That feels like a good thing for me, that they are able to bump him up in terms of rotation. They do lose to the Nets last night as we're recording, but they need to be a losing team. They've needed to be a losing team and a selling team for a while now. But Matas in that game takes 15 shots, 3 of 7 from 3, shows you all the things that Matas Buzelis can do that he's not been trusted to do by Billy Donovan. Finishes with 18 points. I just like what he is able to contribute to the Bulls going forward in terms of that next era of whatever the hell the Chicago Bulls will end up being. We're gonna make sure we have Matas Buzelis in there, and then All-Star Weekend to come, Drew. So we'll finish off with bold predictions for that. Some strange kind of narratives, I guess, around All-Star Weekend, or some narrative points at the very least. Dame Dollar being in the 3-point contest is just crazy interesting to me. Trey Murphy of the New Orleans Pelicans was asked about it last night because he's not in there despite being one of the best shooters in the league, and he says that he wasn't even asked. So kind of crazy that a really good 3-point shooter who's healthy wasn't asked over a guy who's on a torn Achilles. I don't hate it because it's All-Star Weekend in LA. The lights are going to be bright, the eyes are going to be on it, and you have your biggest star names there. The part of the reason it kind of winds me up is we're still looking at that old guard as if they're the only All-Star names, rather than making new All-Stars and using these platforms to do that. But then Alperen Şengün replaces Shea, which is another opportunity to do just that, and possibly corrects someone who was quite a big snub for the game.
Yeah, Dame situation, it's intriguing. I'm really curious to see how he performs, and the confidence that you must have to put yourself in the spotlight after being out for months and months and months. It takes a lot of courage. I can respect Dame for doing this, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I said it in the last episode that these all-star snubs always work itself out, right? Because Şengün got rewarded, Kawhi got rewarded. It always works out. There's one more coming, Josh, because Steph Curry's just been ruled out, so somebody else is going to get bumped up. this All-Star narrative is all about the injuries, man. It's so many guys that's hurt, which leads me to my bold story. Welcome to the big stage, Anthony Edwards, as your 2026 MVP. Because so many guys are out, it gives Anthony Edwards the chance to just kind of sneak in there under the bright lights of LA and snag his first ever All-Star MVP. We know what kind of competitor he is. It's really hard for me to believe that these guys aren't going to compete in LA. I was in LA for the 2004 All-Star Weekend, and it's just different there in that city. So you got the young team, U.S. All-Stars versus the old guard, and then you got the team European, which half their team is injured, so it sets up the stage perfectly. Congratulations, Ant. Calling it now.
I like it. I'm obviously going to be rooting for Kawhi to be my All-Star Game MVP on Intuit Dome court as well. It feels like he has to hold it down for the Clippers there, but I'm going to take a slightly different direction with my bold prediction for All-Star Weekend, because we mentioned the field being set for the three-point contest, Damian Lillard being a surprise entry into that. A couple of other surprises in there. If you're looking at a guy like Bobby Portis being in there, we're not used to seeing bigs in there. It's usually a kind of guard-heavy thing, but guard-forward combo, someone who's really surprised us all this season, I think is going to surprise us again. Con Kneppel is going to be my three-point contest winner for All-Star Weekend. I'm booking it right now. I love Con's mentality, everything I've heard from him, everything I've seen from him. I think if we're getting a breakout star in terms of All-Star Game MVP, we're about to get a breakout star in Con Kneppel in the three-point contest.
Hey, if he can pull this off with the pressure, because now there's pressure, right? Like, if he can handle all of that, you're looking at a star now. He's coming away from NBA All-Star on a national map, on a world map, because like everyone doesn't pay attention to Charlotte. No one's watching Charlotte games, right? Like he's in the headlines and people are looking at headlines, but no one's really watching. Like if he comes out of here as that, people are gonna really start paying attention to Charlotte. And now all of a sudden, Con Kneppel, he might be a Nike athlete. Let's see.
Yeah, I think there's just huge things to come from Con. Everything he's been asked of this season, going against elite defenders, he's done it. So I think he could have one more surprise in his locker there, the man from Duke. But that will do it for us. A bumper episode of Crossover the Pond this week. We hope you all enjoyed the tier list. As I say, let us know your thoughts on Twitter, in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Find me and Drew on social media, reach out to us and let us know what you thought. But all that leaves me left to do is to say, Drew, lead us out.
Well, make sure you get your rest. Come back rejuvenated. NBA basketball ends in 2 days. So we've left you with an hour and 20 minutes of content to slowly drip away until the NBA returns, because it's going to be out for a week. And when we come back, we're going to hit the road running until the NBA playoffs. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great week, guys, and take care.